outside.
What do we have here? If you're from the US like I am, then I bet you haven't seen this tent before. This is the Forclaz Tent Tarp MT900. This is a tent that you can get at Decathlon, but not in the US on their website as far as I can tell. I bought this tent at one of Decathlon's retail stores while I was on a trip in France recently, and I am really excited to try it out. This is advertised to be an ultralight 3-season backpacking tent. It's really not designed for car camping, although you certainly could use it for that. I paid 190 euros, which is about $205 all in. I decided to come on a quick, easy overnight backpacking trip to test it out. So come camping with me and let's see if this thing is worth you taking a trip to France to get one or not. But first, a word about packability. This thing is about 4 liters in size, volume-wise. When I measured it all packed up like this, it measured 16 inches long by about 6 inches in diameter. That's about 40 by 15 centimeters. It's advertised as weighing 1,300 grams, 1.3 kilos. That comes out to 2 pounds and 13 ounces. When I weighed it on my scale at home, that came in pretty accurate. You could certainly divide up the parts among you and your hiking partner to spread the weight. A lot of cool little thoughtful design elements in the packaging here, even like that little elastic band around the stake pouch. Why don't they all do that? Got these 2 little poles. Oh, and it's even 2-sided. This side has interesting poles and 3 guy lines. And the other side of the pouch has the stakes. It said there was 11 stakes. Let's count 1, 2, 9, 10, 11. Sure enough, these stakes are made of aluminum. Got a little hook on the end. So there's your whole kit. You've got the tent, and that can actually be split into 2 parts, the outer shell and the inner. And then you've got the 2 little poles, 11 stakes, that pouch, 3 guy lines, and then of course your burrito bag. So here's how the different parts of the package break down in case you do want to split it up and you want to know the weights of each component. There's no ground sheet included with this tent, and where I'm at, I probably don't need one because the ground is soft and I've got some vegetation, so I'm not that worried about it. But because it's pearly white and it's brand new, I did bring along a sheet of Tyvek I'm gonna put under it, make sure I don't cause any problems the first time I use it. You can, however, purchase a separate ground sheet designed for it from Decathlon, at least abroad. All right, it's getting pretty late in the evening, so I need to get this thing set up. Already I noticed it's pretty clever how they attach the inner and the outer. There's one little setting there fitting. Some inside as well, look like that. So you can take that apart if you want to carry them separately. I believe the first thing I need to do is put stakes in the corners. Let's get 4 of them. The ground's being cooperative. So this is not a freestanding tent, and it does not include all the poles you need. You have to have 2 trekking poles to set it up. It says the optimum height is to set your trekking pole between 110 and 120 centimeters. 115 should be the sweet spot. So that's what I'm gonna adjust them to. Yeah, 115 centimeters, 45 inches. Where exactly do you insert it? It goes right in there. Okay. That's cool. I think this too is a real clever, neat little design. Little aluminum piece there. Fits your trekking pole perfectly. There it goes. So that's pretty clever too. The way that hooks up there, and even there, that stake ring. Look at that, 1 stake, those 2 lines. Clever. Now I just need to finish sticking it out, guy it out, and get it all tensioned right. Watching for wildlife. Sometimes there's bighorn sheep out here, a lot of birds, vultures, ducks, pigeons, chukars. That's it so far. The wildest wildlife I've seen yet. Some cows out here. This little mechanism is pretty darn slick, if you ask me. The way this works, cords hook there and there. And then once you get that stake in, you can just adjust this, and it locks really well, and it pulls out both the top and bottom. Seems to keep it pretty well tensioned. The only part I'm concerned about is this sagging part, but I think I can run one of those guy lines from here, or maybe when I do the two sides, that'll take care of it. We'll see. Okay, just tension these last couple ones up. I think we're golden. All right, let's take a look inside. Very white. As far as ease of use goes, I'd say this is about medium in complexity. It's not super difficult, but it is a little trickier than just the two-pole dome tents. The biggest thing I see is you gotta have everything tensioned just right, and you gotta have soft ground to stake it in. This would be really hard to set up on rocks because you need a pretty good amount of tension in order to get that roof to stay taut. I didn't find it too hard to do, but if you're a beginner and this is the first tent you ever set up, it's probably not gonna be super intuitive. However, once I did figure it out, it's pretty clever, some of the design elements they have. Where you plant the stakes, how the guy lines tension, little things like that, and even those two end poles that do come with the tent, the way they are inserted is smart. They do a good job at not using too many materials. The design is really well thought out in my opinion. I love the reflective guy lines on tents like this. Just a couple observations here in this tent. Here I'm sitting up and I'm 6'1" and I do have some clearance sitting up straight and comfortably, so that's nice. There's some tents, one other one I have that is not, I can't even sit up in, and it's really annoying. This is a 2-person tent. It's very comfortable for 1 person. It would be tight for 2. I'm curious if it would even hold 2 25-inch pads. I'll have to look. Just barely. I bet it would push out a little bit on the sides, but I bet you could do it. It would just be snug. This is definitely smaller than like a double or full-size bed in here. When I'm laying down here, you can see my head is not quite touching this. This material does sag a bit, but I don't know that that's a big deal. I think that's actually just by design in part. I could probably adjust things to make it a little more taut. And the same goes for the bottom. You know, my feet, I guess if I'm sticking them up, they do kind of touch there. But the thing about that at the foot of the tent is that the outer wall is definitely pulled out tight. So I'm not too worried about it in the rain, but I would like to sleep in it in a rainstorm and really see. But there's a good amount of separation between the inner tent and the outer fly or shell. But overall, for 1 person, very comfortable in here. Very nicely sized. 2 people, I'm not sure. Me and my kid, I think, would be fine, but I'm not sure if I'd want to be in here with my wife or another full-grown person. It's doable if all your gear's out. Good night. So it's the next morning. I slept great. I really enjoyed the night in this tent, but I also had excellent weather. There was no real wind or rain to speak of. A bit of a breeze, but nothing bad. When I took a walk around or noticed the tent this morning, it looked like it might have been sagging just a little bit, maybe lost a little tension in there. Anybody that's ever camped in a tent, you probably realize that's pretty normal, but it wasn't anything super concerning. And if you'd kind of take a look, this is a pretty stable tent. In fact, Decathlon does some pretty rigorous testing. They had a third-party lab do some wind testing, and they rate this tent to withstand winds up to 70 kilometers per hour, which is about 45 miles an hour. When they do that testing, they do it in a wind tunnel, and they said that they tested each face of the tent. But I suspect this will do fairly well in wind, although you might lose some of that tension, and that could be a little annoying. But frankly, I don't even know if that's true. I'm just suspecting that could be something that might happen. As far as waterproofing goes, both the shell and the floor of the tent have been treated. Suffice it to say, the floor is intended to be a little bit more waterproof than the shell. More on that in a minute. From what I read, the way they tested for the waterproofing was to simulate a 3-hour tropical rainstorm. But I have no personal experience with this tent in the rain just yet. I did read a few reviews on Decathlon's website about how some people did experience some leaking. That may have been the way they pitched it, I'm not sure. Whew, it is a bright day. Let's do a walk around this tent and let's talk about the materials, the build quality, and some of the features I like about it, or not. First of all, the stakes, as I think I mentioned before, are made of aluminum. One really clever design element of this tent, I think, is that they use different materials in different spots to optimize them for where those materials are. For example, the shell here is made of 20 denier polyester. Now, polyester is good as a shell because one, it is stiff, it's rigid, it's not going to flex or stretch as much. So when you get rain, when you get weather, when you get wind, it's not going to stretch out like nylon might. It's not quite as abrasion resistant, but it's very good. The shell is also treated with a siliconized PU coating, siliconized polyurethane. That's going to help a lot with the waterproofing. I really like these vestibules, and I love the fact that there is a vestibule on both sides. There's plenty of room in there to cover your backpack and everything you might need, your shoes, a hat outside. Now, the inner shell is made of nylon or polyamide. Nylon as a tent material can be more durable and longer lasting, but it's not, and even more abrasion resistant than polyester. But the problem with it is that it stretches and sags, especially when it's wet. So having that as a shell can mean that your rain fly might sag and touch your inner shell, your inner wall, which can then result in you and your stuff getting wet inside. So they use nylon to cut weight as well because it's lighter than polyester. So on the inside here, this is a 40 denier polyamide or nylon floor mat. So it's got more waterproofing and it's a little bit more durable, thicker, which is great for the floor. Now, I did put a ground mat under here of Tyvek, as I mentioned. It's not entirely necessary if you're on good ground. There's a lot of opinions about that. You can make your own. I like how they use different materials to optimize for both weight and abrasion and waterproofing. All of the inside material, the inner shell, is all PU coated as well, but not siliconized. That's only for the outside. So here on the floor we have a thick nylon, then here we have a thin nylon on the inner shell. We've got, of course, a lot of this mosquito netting around in the doors halfway, but not all the way down to the ground, which is good. And then here, the main part of the roof of the inner shell is also nylon. One thing I did experience last night was that nylon shell, there was some static electricity going on, so the inner wall was actually coming into contact with the outer wall. That quit, that wore off or went away, whatever. Neutralized, so it's not a problem. Because normally you have this pretty good sized gap, where the poles are, that's almost a 6-inch gap. And even here, down in here, you've got, a good hand spread. That means when it rain's gonna hit the outer wall and shouldn't come in contact with the inner wall, which should keep you and your stuff dry inside. The inner shell attaches to the outer at points like that and down there in the corners. That can all be detached, so I suppose there's a situation where if you really wanted to cut some weight, you could even leave that inner wall at home and just use this like a tarp. Maybe that's why they call it a tarp tent. It's not like your traditional tarp, but that could then just be a single wall shelter that you sleep underneath directly on the ground. That would save you 1.5 pounds or so of weight. So why is this tent totally white? You might have asked yourself the same thing as I did. This is part of Decathlon's minimal editions line of undyed outdoor gear. Now, the point of that is that 95% of the materials they use in this undyed collection is supposed to be undyed. That is supposed to save a lot of water in the manufacturing process and help offset CO2 emissions by as much as 60% is what they claim. Whether or not that's important to you is totally up to you, but I think it's an interesting concept, and frankly, I don't mind it being white. I kind of like it being light inside. I like being able to be woken up naturally with the sunlight in the morning, and that kind of helps with all that. The downside, obviously, is that it's probably more prone to getting dirty or being stained. I'll see how that really turns out over time, but honestly, I don't get too worked up about that anyway. The white color should also help keep it cool when it's hot outside. It should be a little bit cooler in there given everything is white. The other things that will help it stay cool are, of course, this mosquito netting, of which it has quite a bit in the upper 2/3 of the inner tent, except for that roof. Then it has these two vents, and they're held open just with a little rod there, and it's fully open on the inside. So that will obviously still shed water, but it will help keep it cool in there when it's warm out. And of course, you could close that if you wish. They have one of those on either side. I love that this is a double wall tent so that you do have the inner and outer, and I also love the versatility of being able to just use this outer as a tarp only. That could work wonderfully well if you've got good weather conditions and you're not worried about pests like rodents or bugs getting inside. One other thing I forgot to to mention on the material is that I also appreciate that all the seams are seam sealed with thermo bonded tape. You can see that in the sun. Not everybody does, but I do like a tent that uses the trekking poles. I only recently started using trekking poles, and I'm starting to understand why people do. And I do like the idea of one tool doing multiple jobs. And the way this integrates makes me feel like it's not gonna put any undue wear and tear on the tent, based on how they have it attached at the top and the bottom. Inside the tent, you don't have a lot of frills or features, but you do have a net pocket on either side where you can stick your headlamp, your phone, things like that that you want quick access to at night. Let me mention a few pros and cons based on my brief experience with this tent so far. One big pro for me is the clever use of different materials in different spots. I love that the polyester shell is going to be water resistant and is not going to stretch or fail in the wind and rain. I love that the inner material sheds weight with nylon, that the floor mat is more waterproof and abrasion resistant. I appreciate that they use different coatings in different places to optimize for that part of the tent. Another big pro for me is just the weight. At under 3 pounds, you're getting a capable 2-person, 3-season tent. I can see myself using this for things like backpacking, backcountry hunting, and even motorcycle camping. I love that it uses trekking poles. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I love that you get all of that for only 200 bucks or 190 euros if you're in France. I recognize that price might vary in different places where this is available, and the fact that it's not currently available in the US is sort of a bummer, because 200 bucks for a tent of this caliber is a really great deal here. I believe this backpacking tent is on par with other tents that you can find in the US for a much higher price point. I'm talking 2, even 3 times as much money. While I have not yet been able to fully test or vet this tent in lots of different weather conditions, Decathlon does do independent testing for all of their gear. Not only did they use a lab to test for wind and rain, but before they released this product to the public, they had an independent company in the French Alps do 5 weeks of testing using it on treks and backcountry trips. Another pro about this tent is that Decathlon offers a 5-year warranty on it, and they have excellent customer service. It is repairable, and they have spare parts available for it where they sell it. Personally, I also like the white color, not just because it's eco-friendly, but because I think it's really nice. I like that bright color. I like it being cooler and lighter inside. However, one con to that is that it might get a bit more dirty than other tents, or at least it'll probably get just as dirty as any other tent. It might just show it a little more. One other potential con, only based on other online reviews, is that some people had issues with either the guy lines or even the elastic cords inside those poles breaking. So that might be a weak point in the quality, or maybe it's something that they've improved since those reviews were put online. I don't know. Hasn't been my experience yet. I think the materials used here are pretty par for the course, so I'm not too worried about it. It would also be easy to replace or repair. And the same story goes for some complaints of it leaking in heavy rain or having trouble in the wind. That could be a downside that I haven't experienced yet. But just based on how sturdy it is when you set it up and shake it, as long as your stakes are in solid ground and you've got good angles on your guy lines, I suspect this is going to do all right. But perhaps the biggest con for us in the US is that you simply can't buy this here. That is a major bummer. But it's also a good excuse to go to France, buy yourself one of these, and do a backpacking trip in the Pyrenees. So what do you think about this tent? If you like it and you wish they sold it here in the US, let's try to show Decathlon that we mean it by hitting the like button on this video, and also like the pinned comment below. The more engagement and the more interest they get, perhaps we'll start seeing some more affordable options like this excellent backpacking tent come to the US. I love to find budget-friendly gear, and that's one of the reasons I really do personally love Decathlon. This is not a sponsored video. I bought this tent with my own money, but I really do like the brand, and I appreciate that it makes it more attainable for people to get in the outdoors with good gear. That's not to say everything they make is great. I don't know, but I've had a pretty good experience with a lot of the things I've bought. Now, if you want to see some hiking gear that is way cheaper at Decathlon than anywhere else and is available in the US, go watch this video next. Then gear up and get outside.